The morning my father was buried, I wore the wrong shoes. That's what I kept thinking about as I stood at the entrance of Gracewood Funeral Home in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, staring at the double oak doors that my stepmother had just told me I was not allowed to walk through. The heels I grabbed in the dark hotel room at 5 a.m. were half a size too small, and they were pinching my left foot so badly I could feel my heartbeat in my toes. I remember thinking, focus on the shoes. Don't cry here. Not in front of her. You're not family, Nora, my stepmother said. She didn't raise her voice. She never raised her voice. That was the thing about her. She had spent 15 years perfecting the art of cruelty delivered at a conversational volume. Your father made his wishes very clear. Behind her, through the gap in the door, I could see flowers. White lilies everywhere, the kind my father hated. He always said lilies smelled like a hospital trying to cover something up. I looked at her. She was wearing black, obviously. But the kind of black that cost money, tailored jacket, pearl earrings, hair set like she was attending a charity gala. She had been married to my father for 11 years. I had known him for 31. He's my father, I said. He was, she corrected, and closed the door. I should explain who I am and what I do, because it matters later. My name is Nora Callahan. I'm 31 years old. For the past 4 years, I have been a federal prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Louisiana. Before that, I clerked for a federal judge in D.C. Before that, I went to Tulane Law on a full scholarship because we didn't have money for anything else. I mention this not to impress anyone, but because context matters. I know how systems work. I know what evidence looks like. I know the difference between what something appears to be and what it actually is. My father, Robert Callahan, knew those things too. He spent 30 years as a civil engineer who eventually built his own firm, Callahan and Associates, that did infrastructure contracts across the Gulf Coast. Roads, bridges, water treatment plants. He was not a flashy man. He drove the same Ford F-150 for 12 years. He kept a thermos of black coffee on his desk that he refilled from a pot he made himself because he thought paying $4 for coffee at a shop was a moral failing. He was stubborn and quiet and sometimes emotionally unavailable in ways that took me years to stop being angry about. But he was mine, and I was his. My mother died when I was 9. Ovarian cancer, caught too late. After that, it was just the two of us in a small house off Perkins Road in Baton Rouge. He coached my soccer team even though he didn't understand soccer. He drove me to every debate tournament in high school in that F-150 with a broken radio, so we just talked the whole way. When I got into Tulane, he cried, actually cried, which I had never seen before, and said, "Your mother would have had so much to say right now." It was the best thing he could have said. He met my stepmother when I was 20. She was a real estate agent. She was charming and well-dressed, and she laughed at everything he said in a way that seemed, at the time, like affection. I was away at college. I told myself it was good that he wasn't alone. I told myself that for a long time. The funeral home had a side entrance. A young man in a black vest was standing outside it, checking his phone, and he looked up when he heard my heels on the pavement. I asked if I could come in through there. He looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I was told." "I know what you were told," I said. "I'm the deceased's biological daughter. I'm an officer of a federal court, and I am not going to make a scene. I just want to see my father." He stepped aside. The service hadn't started yet. The room was maybe 60% full. Colleagues from the firm, old neighbors I recognized, people from the church my stepmother attended, but my father never did. My stepbrother, Gary, was standing near the front in a suit that still had the crease marks from the dry cleaning bag. He saw me across the room and his face did something complicated. Not guilt exactly, but the expression of a man who has done something he would prefer not to be confronted about. Gary was my stepmother's son from her first marriage. He was 35, worked at my father's firm in an operations consulting role that, as far as I could tell, meant he forwarded emails and attended lunches. My father had given him that job because he believed in keeping the peace, and keeping the peace had always cost him something. I found a seat near the back. No one stopped me. The service was 40 minutes long. The pastor talked about my father's generosity and his faith, two things I would have ranked third and fourth on the list of things that defined him. No one mentioned that he had built a water treatment facility that still provided clean water to 40,000 people in a parish that couldn't have afforded it otherwise. No one mentioned that he had paid 3 of his employees college tuitions anonymously, and I only found out because one of them told me at his retirement party with tears running down her face. No one mentioned the debating F-150 or the black coffee or the way he'd cried when I got into law school. When it was over, my stepmother stood at the door accepting condolences. She reached for my hand when I passed, and I let her take it because I am a professional. I hope you understand, she said quietly, that the reading of the will is a private matter. Family only. I am family, I said. The legal family, she said. He updated his documents 2 years ago. His attorney will be in touch. I walked to my rental car. I sat in it for 4 minutes. Then I drove to the hotel, changed my shoes, ordered room service I didn't eat, and called my college roommate who talked to me until 2 a.m. about absolutely nothing important. It was exactly what I needed. 3 weeks later, I was back in New Orleans at my desk when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, a Baton Rouge area code. I almost didn't answer. The man on the other end introduced himself as Hal, the night security guard at Callahan and Associates. He had worked for my father for 18 years. He said he was calling because he had found something in my father's office during the after-hours clean-out and he didn't think it should go in the box with everything else. He had my number, he said, because my father had given it to him 4 years ago and told him, "If anything ever happens to me and something feels wrong, you call Nora." "What did you find?" I asked. "A letter," he said, "in an envelope. Has your name on it. And there's something else inside. A key." I drove to Baton Rouge the next morning. The envelope was worn at the edges like it had been handled many times. My name was written in my father's handwriting, the same handwriting that had signed my birthday cards for 30 years. The same slightly slanted letters that I had to concentrate to read because he'd never learned to write in a straight line without lined paper. Inside was a letter, 2 pages, handwritten, and a small brass key with a paper tag that said, "First Federal, Baton Rouge, Box 447. I sat in Hal's car in the parking lot of the firm and I read my father's letter. He started by saying he was sorry. Not the generic kind of sorry, the specific kind. He was sorry that he hadn't been more honest with me about what was happening inside the marriage. He was sorry that when I had tried, over the years, to raise concerns about my stepmother's behavior, he had defended her, not because he didn't believe me, but because confronting it meant confronting how much he had gotten wrong. He wrote, "I have spent a long time being a man who could build a bridge over a swamp, but couldn't have one hard conversation with his daughter. I know that doesn't make sense. I know it doesn't make it better." He said that in the last 18 months, he had begun to understand that things in his financial life were not where they should be, that money was moving in ways he hadn't authorized, that documents had been signed that he had no memory of signing. He had started keeping records. He had put those records in box 447. He said, "If you're reading this, I wasn't able to fix it myself. But you know how to do this, Nora? You know how to do this, Nora. You know exactly what to do." I folded the letter. I put it back in the envelope. Then I sat there for a while watching the pigeon walk back and forth along a parking divider, as if it had somewhere very important to be. "You okay?" Hal asked. "Not even a little," I said, "but I will be." First Federal Bank on Florida Boulevard still had the old dark wood lobby that banks used to have before they all became minimalist white boxes. The woman at the safe deposit counter had worked there long enough to recognize my father's name and say, "I'm so sorry for your loss." Like she meant it. Box 447 held a manila folder 2 inches thick. I spent 3 days going through it. Not at the hotel. I drove back to New Orleans and spread everything across my kitchen table. What I found was methodical, careful, and devastating. My father had been quietly tracking irregularities in the firm's accounts for 14 months before he died. Wire transfers to an LLC he had not established in amounts just under the reporting threshold. Contract bids that had been modified after his signature. Small changes to payment schedules that redirected portions of project funds to that same LLC. His signature on 2 documents he had flagged with a sticky note that said simply, I did not sign these. I am a federal prosecutor. I know what financial fraud looks like. I know what forged sliggers look like. I know what a shell company structure designed to siphon money out of a closely held business looks like. This was all of those things. I also found something I hadn't expected, a second letter, shorter, written on a notepad. It said, Gwen helped set it up. Gary managed the transfers. I don't know how long. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Gwen, my stepmother's given name. I want to be precise about what happened next because I've had to recount it in legal settings and the details matter. I did not act on emotion. I did not confront anyone. I took the folder to my supervisor at the U.S. Attorney's Office and I disclosed that I had a personal conflict of interest and needed the case handled by someone else. My supervisor looked at the documents and went very quiet. He said, Nora, this is a referral to the FBI. I know, I said. This is going to be complicated. I know that too. The investigation took 7 months. I was not on it. I was updated through my supervisor when appropriate and excluded when required. I went back to my normal caseload. I prosecuted a Medicare fraud case and a series of contract bid rigging charges for a construction company in Shreveport. I ran 3 times a week and called my college roommate and did not think about my stepmother more than approximately 40 times a day. During those 7 months, the estate was in probate. My stepmother's attorney had filed the updated will, which left everything, the firm, the house, the savings, to her and Gary, with a small bequest to a church foundation. My name was not in it. The will had been updated according to the filing, in the spring 2 years before my father died. My father's letter to me had been written the following winter. I retained an estate attorney named Dorothy Vaughn, who was 72 years old, had been practicing law in Baton Rouge for 45 years, and wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and did not suffer anyone who tried to waste her time. She looked at the will, looked at the timeline, and said, This is suspicious at minimum and fraudulent at maximum. We're going to contest it. The hearing was on a Tuesday in March. Probate court, downtown Baton Rouge. The courtroom was smaller than the ones I worked in. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the particular smell of old case files. My stepmother arrived with 2 attorneys. Gary was with her in a suit that fit him better than the funeral one. Dorothy and I sat at the other table. The hearing was procedural, an initial appearance on our contest motion, not the full trial. But my stepmother had brought her attorneys as a show of force, and I understood the tactic. I used it sometimes myself. What she didn't know was what had happened the previous week. The FBI investigation had concluded. Charges had been filed, the indictment was sealed, but it would not stay sealed for long. I knew this. Dorothy knew this. What we were waiting for was timing. The judge called the session to order. My stepmother's lead attorney began speaking about the validity of the will, about the decedent's clear intentions, about the undue influence claim being without merit. He was good. Polished, confident, the kind of attorney who had won a lot of hearings by making the other side feel small. I was taking notes. My pen was moving steadily across the legal pad. I had learned to look calm when I was not, and I had been practicing that particular skill for the better part of a year. Then the courtroom door opened. 2 people walked in. I knew both of them, not personally but professionally. One was a special agent from the FBI's New Orleans field office. The other was an assistant U.S. attorney from the Financial Crimes Division. My stepmother's attorney stopped speaking. The agent approached the bench and handed the judge a document. The judge read it. The judge's expression did not change because judges are also trained to look calm when they are not. We'll need to take a brief recess, the judge said. During the recess, in the hallway outside the courtroom, my stepmother was served with a federal criminal indictment, wire fraud, financial elder abuse, forgery of a legal instrument, and conspiracy. Gary received his separately in a simultaneous action at the firm. I was standing near the water fountain when it happened. I did not look at her. I looked at the wall, which was painted the same institutional off-white as every government building I had ever worked in, and I breathed. Dorothy appeared at my elbow. She said quietly, Your father picked a good key. The criminal proceedings took 14 months. My stepmother entered a plea agreement. Gary went to trial and was convicted on 3 of 4 counts. The Shell LLC was dissolved. The fraudulent wire transfers, amounting to just under $900,000 over 3 years, were traced. documented, and became the basis of the criminal sentence. The forged will was invalidated. The estate went to probate again, this time under the earlier valid will, the one my father had written before his marriage, which left everything to me with a provision for his employees' pension fund that was, I thought, the most like him of anything. On the day Dottie filed the final order with the probate court, she called me and said, "It's done." "Thank you," I said. "Thank your father," she said. "He left you very good breadcrumbs." I have thought a lot about why my father didn't come to me while he was still alive. I've landed on this. He was a man who built things himself. He built the firm himself. He built our life after my mother died, himself from scratch, on an engineer's salary and an enormous amount of stubborn will, asking for help, especially from his daughter, especially about something this personal, would have felt like admitting that the structure he'd spent his whole life building had developed a crack he couldn't repair. I understand that. I don't agree with it. But I understand it. What he did instead was what he knew how to do. He documented everything. He organized it clearly, and he trusted the right person with the key. That was his version of asking for help. It was quiet and indirect, and it required me to meet him halfway. That was also, I've come to understand, just very much him. The firm is operating again under new management that his senior engineers have been running since the indictment. They asked if I wanted to take a role. I said no. I'm a prosecutor, not an engineer. But I go to Baton Rouge every month now, and I sit in the conference room with the team sometimes on Friday afternoons, and I drink terrible coffee from the same pot my father kept stocked for 30 years. I kept the brass key. It sits on my desk at the office in New Orleans, next to a framed photo that one of the secretaries at the firm found in a drawer during the cleanout. My father and me at my law school graduation, standing in front of Tulane's Gibson Hall, both of us squinting into the afternoon sun. He looks so proud it almost hurts to look at. I look like I'm trying not to cry, which I was. He told me that day, standing on that lawn, I built a lot of things I'm proud of. You're the best of them. I've been a prosecutor for 4 years. I've made arguments in front of federal judges. I've cross-examined witnesses who were trying very hard to be convincing. I've kept my composure in rooms where the stakes were life-altering. I have never been able to get through that memory without my voice breaking, even now. Some structures are built to last. The ones my father was proudest of all were. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever felt pushed out of a place you had every right to be, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you know someone who needs to hear that the truth always finds a way through, share this with them. I'll see you in the next one. I've thought a lot about what my father did and didn't do. For a long time, I focused on the didn't. He didn't come to me while he was alive, didn't pick up the phone, didn't say out loud what he clearly knew was happening inside his own house, that used to sit in me like a splinter I couldn't find the edge of. But here's what I've landed on, and I mean this without any softness that isn't earned. The choices people make always catch up to them, not as punishment from some outside force, not as cosmic payback, just as the natural weight of cause and effect. Gwen spent 11 years building a life on something that wasn't hers. She moved money, she forged signatures, she kept my father isolated from the one person who might have seen through it clearly, and every single one of those actions left a trace. Not because the universe was watching, because actions always leave traces. My father understood that. He was an engineer. He knew that nothing disappears. It just changes form. So he documented everything, quietly, carefully, over 14 months, the same way he would have documented stress fractures in a bridge. He didn't know if he would live to use it. He just knew that truth, once recorded, doesn't stay buried. What Gary and Gwen didn't account for was that the person they were stealing from had raised a federal prosecutor. They didn't account for the fact that I had spent 4 years learning exactly how to read what they had done and name it accurately. They underestimated me the same way people underestimate quiet women who don't argue at funerals. That was their mistake, and it was a significant one. I think about Dorothy sometimes, 72 years old, glasses on a chain, not a single wasted word, and the way she said, "Your father left you very good breadcrumbs." She meant it practically, but I've turned it into something I try to carry. The idea that the most important thing you can do for the people you love is leave them something true. Not money, not property, truth. My father left me a letter, a key, and 14 months of careful, quiet record keeping. That was his version of faith in me. It required me to show up and do the work, but the foundation was already there. I'm not a person who believes that suffering builds character automatically. It doesn't. Plenty of people go through hard things and come out of it smaller, angrier, more closed. What builds something is what you do with it. Whether you let it make you cynical or whether you turn it into precision. I chose precision. I chose to understand the system well enough to use it for something right. That's not a virtue I was born with. It's something I built year by year, case by case, in the same methodical way my father built water treatment plants in parishes that couldn't afford them. You show up. You document. You don't stop until the structure holds. The brass key is still on my desk. I look at it when cases get hard. It reminds me that someone believed I could find the door even when he couldn't tell me where it was. I try to be that for other people now. The person who leaves clear records, who trusts that the right person will know what to do with the truth when they find it. That's all any of us can really do. Build something that lasts. Trust the people who've earned it. And never ever underestimate the quiet ones.